Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to another edition of Let's Talk Fantasy Football. I am your host, Nick Schreck, and joining me tonight is easily our smartest fantasy analyst. He is here actually on the ground in Jersey. It's Nick Walsh. Walsh, what's going on, bud?
Not much, dude. I'm doing pretty well. I am coming to you from the house I grew up in rather than my apartment in San Francisco, which is a nice change. I'm back in New Jersey. Give a quick shout out to our close friend and a listener, so he'll hear this. Tyler Corder, who's getting married on Friday, which is why I'm back in New Jersey. But Shrek, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing fantastic, Walsh. We're here to talk fantasy football. Tyler's taking a plunge, good or bad, come Friday. And it's going to be great. It's a great week. You're back in Jersey. We're excited for Tyler. We're excited to talk fantasy football. And, quite frankly, actually, I was super pumped. I got an email earlier today from someone who's looking to work with us, and I won't give any shout-outs yet. But in his email, he said, I am listening to your boys on the podcast right now while I'm cracking open a White Claw because of your recommendation. And it was a beautiful thing to read. So he'll probably hear that shout out here on this episode. I just thought it was a testament to you guys and your White Claw shout out. So
seriously, man, that's wonderful things. Also, you said Tyler's taking the plunge for good and bad. It can't be worse than some of the fantasy drafts he's had in the past couple of years. Hey, what's up?
That's where we need a live drop.
Your fantasy draft skills suck, Tyler.
Yeah,
anyway.
Take that. So only up for Tyler, but in all seriousness, we are super excited for him and Dana come Friday. Maybe we'll get a live podcast done at the wedding for you guys, because that'd be cool. And I'm sure they'd really appreciate that.
Definitely.
On Friday, not stealing their thunder at all. But Walsh, before we start talking fantasy football here today, let's give a shout out to Auction Draft. Auction Draft is the best site for running your fantasy football auction league in 2018. You can sign up now and get on the list for launch by going to letstalkfantasyfootball.com/auction draft. And guys, because you're here from Let's Talk Fantasy Football, we want you to tell them that we sent you. And for that, you use the code LTFF. Auction Draft is going to give you 50% off your league for the 2018 season. And they want you to know how important it is that you are listening to the podcast, you're playing Auction Draft with them. And we're soon enough going to have a live podcast coming to you guys while we do our very first auction draft as Let's Talk Fantasy Football. And I'm looking forward to that one, Walsh.
Oh yeah, that should be a lot of fun. Auction drafts are super wild and super stressful, but also extremely fun.
So lots of ups and downs. I can promise you the DON will be here, and the DON will definitely lose his mind as he overpays, I'm sure, for Aaron Rodgers and many, many, many others. But Walsh, I also want to just give a shout out to ourselves here, toot our own horn just a little bit. We are now in the running at podcastawards.com for the podcast. So for those of you guys that listen, whether you like us, whether you don't, it would be cool punishment to put us up there to have to accept an award for the podcast. So if you hate us, definitely nominate us. If you love us, nominate us, or do it for the Don. The DON.
Seriously.
We're doing it for him. So guys, go to podcastawards.com. You can register for free. Click on the nominations tab, and then you can vote for us in the best of. I think it's best in show, and then the sports category. So again, we'd appreciate it whether you love us, hate us. But with that, Walsh, let's dive in. Let's start with the Seattle Seahawks, and let's kick it off at QB with Russell Wilson coming off the board right now. QB number 3, first pick in the 6th round. I know we tend to shy away from QBs early. But do you think he's priced right for kind of what he's done there? We've watched a bad offensive line, but he's had a career high in passes last year of 553. He's entering a prime age at 29. I think he's probably about where he should be. I think he may finish higher than QB3.
Yeah, I think QB3 is about right for him. I'm not really going to be touching him in that range. You touched on it, but we tend to wait a little bit on quarterbacks. I do think there's reason to not expect really his performance that he had last year. First of all, the Seahawks hired Brian Schottenheimer as their offensive coordinator. He is an old school coach that seemingly gets jobs for no reason, just because he's like a name in the business or whatever. But not to give throw too much shade on him, but he wants to run the ball more as like this old school coach. He, drafted Rashad Penny way ahead of when anyone thought he was going to go. He's trying to bring in a fullback, which, not that many teams even really carry fullbacks that much anymore. So he wants to run the ball a lot more. That's obviously not good for Russell Wilson's volume.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe it'll improve his efficiency, but he's one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the league, no matter what volume he's throwing it at. So I don't think that moves the needle too much. For me, he's priced right. I guess I'm not going to touch him. I don't think you should expect what he did last year.
Fair enough. I agree. I think, you look at, like you said, that line, what they're going to do with the running game. And he was super efficient. I mean, also his tight end, and we'll talk about him, Ed Dickson. It's not exactly like the inspiration of confidence as a passing target, but we'll talk about the other ones. But I think we're in agreement there. Let's shift to that running back position, Walsh, because you talked about the change there and the focus on fullbacks and running backs and all these kind of different pieces. I have a quote here, actually, and it comes from Pete Carroll, who, for those of you that know me at all, I can't stand the man. And you'll see why again after this quote. "We have a real formula for how we win," stated Carroll. "We've been unable the last 2 years to incorporate a major aspect of that. It is to run the football the way we want to run." And I hate that because their O-line still isn't great, and they have so many different running backs and pieces, possibly a fullback coming into the mix, that I really don't know what to make of it. You got Rashad Penny coming off the board, the 5th pick in the 4th round, running back 20. I know they went up. They got him way ahead of anybody else's expectations, but so you got to think he gets the opportunity based on what they paid. But I don't know. I don't really like any of the running back situation right now because of the uncertainty, Walsh.
Yeah, if I'm really trying to go after anyone, I think it's Chris Carson, because even though they went ahead and they drafted Rashad Penny as early as they did, anytime the coaching staff gets a chance to talk about Chris Carson, they immediately praise him. They praised him all last year. They've been praising him this offseason. It seems like they really do like him. He's going off the board of the first pick in the 11th round. That's running back 47. Penny, I'm just really not in on. He's a guy who, pretty much anyone who covers the NFL draft thought he got extremely overdrafted. He was the 2nd running back off the board. And I don't think a single person who, covered the draft would have called that. So I don't really understand it too much. I'd rather not take the risk on a guy who so many people didn't think should really go there, particularly at running back 20 in the 4th round. Dude, it's a pretty serious price to pay. And I know you're not looking at, too much talent around him, but I just don't think it's worth it. I think Chris Carson's the guy, if you're going to target anyone in the Seahawks backfield, that you should be looking at.
Completely agree. I mean, again, coach speak and GM speak is kind of, it's nonsense at this point. We talk about it all the time. It's hype, but word out of Seattle is that he's been the most impressive running back this summer. GM John Schneider said that Chris Carson looks like the best player on the field. He's added 10 pounds of muscle, and he was the first name Pete Carroll mentioned when asked which player impressed him the most when reporting back for offseason work. So, especially at the price, give me Chris Carson all day. Rashad Penny is it's not going to cut it for me. What about the other running backs? Do you care about any of them? I don't really think there's any value. I think right now this is Chris Carson, and Rashad Penny.
Yeah, I mean, I think J.D. McKissick is a name to kind of keep in mind as we continue, because he was actually pretty good, particularly in the passing game last year. So if you get an injury or something like that, you might see J.D. McKissick jump in, or even without injury, you might see him get some sort of work there. Mike Davis and C.J. Prosise, I think you can safely ignore at this point. Prosise was a guy that I liked a lot out of college, but he really hasn't materialized into anything. He's been constantly injured. So yeah, McKissick's the guy to keep an eye on, but not really to draft.
Okay, fair enough. So keep your eye on him, guys, or if you're playing in dynasties and all these super deep, crazy leagues and whatnot. But Walsh, let's move over to wide receivers and talk about Doug Baldwin, who's a guy that seems to defy logic and I think stats. We talk about regression and some of these things, and particularly you are big on regression in these stats, and he has consistently defied many fantasy analysts predicting a drop-off for Doug Baldwin. He's ranked top 16 among wide receivers in fantasy points per game each of the past 3 years. And and that's despite ranking 21st, 27th, and 42nd in targets per game over that stretch. So he just continues to kind of produce, and the Seahawks lost 172 combined targets this offseason with Jimmy Graham and Paul Richardson leaving the team, which means those targets have to go somewhere. I love Doug Baldwin at wide receiver 10.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think he's an incredible pick. He's a guy that I'm targeting in pretty much all of my drafts. I think how you were saying they lost all those targets with Jimmy Graham and Paul Richardson. They also lost 41 red zone targets, which is an insane amount of red zone targets. So not all of those are going to go to Doug Baldwin, or even not all of those are going to become passing targets. The Seahawks only scored one rushing touchdown with their running backs last year. Yep. So you'd expect fewer passing touchdowns this year just based on that and based on the way they've been talking this offseason. But still, Doug Baldwin is one of those guys who, you said it, we look for regression and that sort of thing based on his efficiency metrics. But at this point, we just have to accept that he with Russell Wilson throwing the ball to him, is just way more efficient than the average wide receiver. So yeah, Doug Baldwin, I think, could set a career high in targets this year. We know his efficiency is incredible. And I think he could set a career high in red zone targets this year. So yeah, everything's kind of coming together for him to have just a spectacular year.
Which is wild because forever everyone has been like, he's got to drop. And I agree. Now is the time to open our arms and give Doug Baldwin the hug that he has deserved for so many years. And I'm sure at some point I was out on Doug Baldwin, but I have seen the light, as they say, with the Lord and in Doug Baldwin. Yeah, Walsh, I do want to hit on, and you nailed it. Graham and Richardson combined to leave 20 targets behind just inside the 10-yard line last year. It's more than 11 teams totaled last year. So again, just based on that volume and everything else, I agree. Nothing but up for Doug Baldwin. I think he's a great value there. What about the other wide receivers? We got Tyler Lockett coming at wide receiver 60, 12th pick in the 13th round, and Brandon Marshall, who is undrafted currently. And then you've got Jaron Brown as well as undrafted. Any of those guys interest you?
I love Tyler Lockett. He's another one of just, a guy that I'm going after in basically every draft because, end of the 13th round, that's a huge who cares on it.
Practically free.
Yeah, pretty much. And Lockett was coming off a broken fibia and tibia last year. He broke those bones in week 16 of 2016. So this is a guy who looked a little sluggish, looked a bit slower last year, but he was coming off a very significant leg injury that happened late in the season the year before. So I think with another year to recover from that injury, and then also just the increased opportunity that we were talking about in this offense, you've lost so many targets, they have to go somewhere. Lockett's a guy who a lot of people thought was extremely talented coming out of college. And I think he is very, very likely to return way more than the draft capital that you're investing in him. So yeah, Lockett in the 13th round, sign me up every day of the week.
Walsh, we are freaking in sync tonight, man. We're bobbing and weaving together because I agree with Tyler Lockett here. And I really, I'm not to go back to Doug Baldwin, but I almost think both of them are somewhat underpriced for what I think the upside is for both of them. Like you said, based on the opportunities, the red zones, the et cetera, particularly Tyler Lockett, obviously at almost free 14th round, pick. But I think nothing but upside. I actually read a report today on Brandon Marshall that said that he very well may get cut by the Seattle Seahawks, depending on what goes on with his health, with coming off the ankle surgery and toe surgery and whatnot. They only guaranteed him $90,000 in the contract they gave him in May. So I wasn't interested there anyway, but I think that goes to show you the drastic drop-off from Tyler Lockett and Doug Baldwin, particularly for what you can get in the 14th round at Tyler Lockett.
Yeah, 100%. I'm with you on Marshall, too. I would like to say I think Jaron Brown is kind of an interesting guy. He seemingly has all the physical tools, and he has produced in sort of limited opportunities throughout the years in Arizona. I don't think you should be drafting him. I just think he's a guy to keep an eye on. Maybe an injury comes up, that sort of thing. Might be a guy to keep in mind for a waiver wire at some point during the season.
Fair enough. Well, guys, there you have it. Russell Wilson and big thing for the passing game at wide receiver. Walsh, let's talk about tight end. Ed Dixon, I think, is the presumed starter at this point, and then you got Nick Vanett there as well. I have no interest in either of the tight ends, despite the target opportunity there as a whole.
Hard no on both of them. The Seahawks offense didn't feature a tight end really before Graham, and they even had trouble incorporating Graham into the offense in his first year with the team. So if they're having trouble incorporating Jimmy Graham into the offense, I don't think Ed Dixon is going to move the needle.
Totally fair. I'm right there with you. So that's it, guys. Don't even spin the tight end wheel in Seattle. And with that, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to hear from Auction Draft. We're going to refill our drinks, and we're going to be back, and we're going to be talking San Francisco 49ers and kick things off with Jimmy G. Here's Auction Draft. All right, guys, we're back, and that was Auction Draft. Again, you can sign up now, auctiondraft.net. Use the promo code LTFF, and you get 50% off your league for 2018. That is an incredible discount. James and the team will take great care of you guys over there, and we're excited for our draft. But since we're not there yet, Walsh, let's kick it off here. Jimmy G coming off the board, QB9, fourth pick in the 9th round. They gave him a 5-year deal worth $137.5 million. I kind of stumbled on that because it's a lot of freaking money. But I think he's going to be great for the 49ers, and I think it was a very, very, very smart move. From a fantasy perspective, do you expect him to continue the trend where he was playing really well last year for him?
Yeah, I mean, you would think there'll be some sort of regression involved there with a 5-game sample size and him just being so incredible. But I mean, he was QB6, fantasy QB6 during those 5 weeks that he was starting for the Niners in 2017. So, hey, taking him at QB9 doesn't seem too bad to me. He's not someone that I'm going out of my way to target, but I think if I'm looking for a quarterback, which I generally start looking in like the 10th, 11th type round, kind of round. So he's going a little bit ahead of that. But if you're in a league where maybe quarterbacks tend to fall, for example, our home league, quarterbacks fall. That's the way it works. I might end up with Jimmy G in that league just because he'll probably fall to the 10th or the 11th rather than being drafted so early. I like where he's going.
Totally fair. And I think he finishes as that top 10 QB. You look at, again, like you said, it's dangerous to, kind of extrapolate that 5-game sample size. So, I'll stay away from doing that. But, some regression, but, Shanahan, I think is going to be obviously the huge piece there. I was looking at some stats courtesy of Pro Football Focus, where they said out of the 6 quarterbacks that Shanahan has worked with, half of them have saw significantly better fantasy results under his lead than without it in their second years. So that was Schaub, Griffin, and Ryan. They note that as far as fantasy ranking, all 3 of the quarterbacks Shanahan worked with over multiple seasons were in the top 10 in fantasy scoring at their position in their second year. So again, Jimmy G, second year technically there in 2018, smaller sample size, wasn't a full season, but I think he's priced right and will finish probably as a top 10 QB.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man.
All right, Walsh, I'm going to let you take this one away because I think you have lots of great things to say about our next guy here, running back Jerick McKinnon. Am I right?
Yeah, so I've kind of been a fan of Jerick McKinnon for a long time. He's currently going ninth pick in the 2nd round. That's running back 13th. So I keep going back and forth because I get very optimistic on him and then sort of try and rein myself back in a little bit. But the case for Jerick McKinnon, one, he had his best year of his career last year. He played very well for the Vikings, had about 60 targets, had a career year in touchdowns, that sort of thing before he got hurt. And then 2, the Niners made him the 4th highest paid running back in the league this offseason.
They paid him a lot of money.
And, a good coaching staff, a good team will make that kind of signing and then still go away from him if they don't think it's going to work out, like during the season or in the preseason or whatever. But goddamn, if you're going to make a guy the 4th highest paid running back in the league, you got to be planning on using him. Yeah. So you would think at least he's going to get the opportunity to show them everything he's got for, at the very least the first half of the season or that kind of thing. And then if he sucks, maybe they move on from there. But I really don't think he's going to be bad. Shanahan, you were talking about how he's gotten the most out of quarterbacks. he's just a good offensive coordinator. He's gotten the most out of most of his running backs too. And if you think about Jerick McKinnon in sort of that Devontae Freeman role, where they have some guys behind him, maybe one of those guys is getting 10 touches a game, and McKinnon's getting 20 touches a game. McKinnon getting 20 touches a game, and I think it's reasonable for him to get 100 targets as well as part of that 20 touches a game. So, I mean, that's completely pays off his price right there at running back 13. If someone's going to get, 20 touches a game and 100 targets as part of that, they're going to be an RB1, and he's going as the first RB2 right now. So, I mean, and to kind of quantify those targets, Carlos Hyde in this offense last year had 88 targets. Matt Breida had an additional 36. Carlos Hyde was kind of getting benched for Breida toward part of the end of the year. So if McKinnon's really out there for those 20 touches a game, 18 touches a game, whatever it may be, I think 100 targets is extremely reasonable. So yeah, I'm pretty in on Jerick McKinnon where he's going right now.
What is the biggest thing that when you talk yourself back off that ledge a little bit, Walsh? Because I mean, we saw some pictures of you by a ledge the past couple of days, and I want to make sure that wasn't you going back and forth on McKinnon.
I cannot confirm or deny whether it was based on Jerick McKinnon, but yeah. So I mean, one of the things is that McKinnon has never really had that kind of workload before. So we talk about him being able to, hold up under this. We don't know if he actually can. We don't know if physically he can do that. He's also kind of been, up until last year, he's been a relatively inefficient runner. So he's always been a pretty good scat back, good at, catching passes out of the backfield. Can he hold up between the tackles? Can he be that primary guy for 16 games this season? And then how, I was saying the number one thing is they paid him so much. Yeah. What if they decide that, they don't like him? It's a new running back, and obviously they wanted him. They went out and got him. They paid him so much because they wanted him specifically. They weren't going to give that money to just anyone. Sure. But I mean, he is on a new team, and he's an unproven player. So I think there are definitely reasons against him, which is why I'm not going crazy and like trying to take him at the beginning of the second round or that kind of thing.
Fair enough.
But if you're telling me mid to late second round, yeah, Jerick McKinnon, I think is a pretty nice pick.
All right. Well, there you have it, guys. Walsh back and forth on the ledge. He also likes roller coasters. Right now, he's playing with the edge on Jerick McKinnon, but he is a fan. So keep an eye on his ADP, guys, as we move through. Let's look at the next running back behind him, Walsh. Matt Breida coming in at running back 54, second pick in the 13th round. He isn't, I would say, an explosive back, but he seems pretty good. He can keep the chains moving. Like you said, he kind of took over some of that role from Carlos Hyde there towards the end of the year, and was kind of involved. I don't have a problem. I actually am cool with his ADP, particularly because of the things you noted on the negatives of Jerick McKinnon there. Can he hold up? What if they don't like him? They move away from him. He may not have the upside right away in fantasy drafts, but depending on how things go, McKinnon, he very well could trend upwards, I think, as we move into the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think his ADP is extremely fair. Like we talked about with Tyler Lockett, it's the 13th round. Yep. You can do what you want there. I don't think it's a bad idea even to handcuff McKinnon with Breida because it's such a late pick. So, yeah, I think he's fine there. It is interesting. They have a couple other guys behind him and Joe Williams, who they actually drafted ahead of him. They were both rookies last year, and Williams was the guy that we kind of thought might emerge in the backfield with Carlos Hyde, but it was Breida who did it. They also have Jeremy McNichols and Raheem Mostert, all of whom have, been talked up by certain people throughout, their time in the league. But I'm kind of interested to see how any of that works out. I don't know that the Niners are going to necessarily say, like, if McKinnon were to go down, I don't know if the Niners say Breida's the guy and now he's getting 18 touches a game, or whether maybe it's some sort of combination of those guys that we're not really sure of.
Totally agree. It'll be I hate to put it this way, but it almost like the some of the ugly three-headed monsters we've seen out of Seattle backfields in the past, and we've seen it elsewhere. Where we were just like, this sucks. This sucks, and we have no idea where it's going to go. But for now, McKinnon's show for sure. And then, if you want to take a dart throw on one of those guys, be our guest. But 13th round, practically free. I do like the handcuff thing. I didn't really think about it because I typically do stay away from handcuffing. But I actually do think it could be a good move there, particularly with the downside we talked about on McKinnon. So thank you for that, Walsh. Look at that.
You got it, man.
People helping people, man. On to wide receiver. We will start with the one, the only Pierre Garçon, wide receiver 32, third pick in the 7th round. He is actually 32 years old. Look at that. What are the odds? Wide receiver 32. That is 32. Stupid facts only coming to you courtesy here. Let's talk fantasy football. But he ends his first season with the 49ers early with an injury. But he flashed some potential there, finished with 40 catches and 500 yards in 8 games. And that was with Hoyer and Beathard at QB. So now he's fully healthy. He gets Jimmy G throwing the football. You know, he slides into the familiar X role, I think, in Kyle Shanahan's offense here. So, you know, the veteran wideout led the NFL with 113 receptions in 2013 in that same role under Shanahan. You know, I think he offers some nice PPR value there in that offense as a whole at his current price there of 3rd pick in the 7th.
Yeah, super about Pierre Garçon in the 7th round. He was on pace for 144 targets last year before getting hurt. So they seem like they want to use him pretty well. I mean, he's not likely to break a big play. He's probably not going to get you anything more than 6 touchdowns if he plays a full season. But if you can get somewhere from 130 to 145 targets out of the guy, I mean, he pays off wide receiver 32 in spades. The only concern I do have is he doesn't have that chemistry yet with Jimmy Garoppolo. You know, we saw Garoppolo really have good chemistry with guys like Marquise Goodwin, George Kittle, even Kyle Juszczyk, the fullback there. So I mean, I'm not too concerned about that. I think it's well worth the price, but it is something to keep in mind that he's never played with Garoppolo before.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, and something to think about as we talk about next, Marquise Goodwin, and we'll talk about George Kittle as well. You know, Goodwin coming off the board, wide receiver 42, 7th pick in the 9th round. He was targeted in 6 games with Jimmy G. He was targeted 13 times on 3rd and 4th down. You know, Goodwin should be a happy receiver, I think, in 2018 with Garoppolo there. I think I hate to say it because I really do like Pierre, but right now, based on what we know, he's probably Jimmy G's most reliable target. Just based on that chemistry and consistency. Maybe Garçon forms into it. Still love the upside of Garçon, but, you know, Goodwin at wide receiver 42, I think you have to love as well. If you like Pierre there, here's a guy that is still going to see a bunch of targets at a cheaper price. And I think nothing but good things here for Goodwin as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'm less bullish on Goodwin. Just because of sort of his splits with and without Garçon. When Garçon was on the field with him, he only averaged about 3 catches for 50 yards per game. So not spectacular there, but he is a deep play guy. You know, he can break a deep one at any point. And we don't know if that role is going to change. Garçon's older. He doesn't have the chemistry with Garoppolo. There's just a lot of moving parts here that make it a little difficult to predict. I certainly wouldn't begrudge anyone for taking Marquise Goodwin in the 9th rounds, but for me, I see him still more as a deep play guy who's going to be a little difficult to predict week to week. And I'm not sure that I really want him on my roster as anything more than a bye week fill-in who you're hoping catches a touchdown that week.
Totally fair, Walsh. Totally fair. I don't have any argument against it. Do you have any interest in these other wide receivers here? Trent Taylor, Aldrick Robinson, Dante Pettis?
I mean, Trent Taylor's likely going to be the slot guy, so you'll see him probably have a couple playable games. He is coming off back surgery though too, so who knows? It's certainly not worth drafting. Aldrick Robinson, I don't think is worth much, and then Dante Pettis is kind of an interesting guy. He was the 12th pick of the 2nd round this year, but in his rookie year here, he will likely just be a punt returner and be on the field sparingly. If you do play in Dynasty, that sort of thing, I kind of like Dante Pettis. There's been some talk of him maybe being the heir apparent to sort of that X receiver role from Pierre Garçon in Kyle Shanahan's offense. So maybe a couple years down the line, he's a guy that we're talking about as worth an early pick. But right now, I don't think it's quite there yet.
All right. Some little Dynasty info, little nugget there from Walsh. Looking out for your Dynasty players. The other pass catcher in this offense, Walsh, Kittle coming off the board, tight end 11, fifth pick in the 10th round. Over the past decade, he is just one of 9 rookie tight ends to eclipse the 500-yard mark, which is pretty awesome considering he spent a lot of the season with Brian Hoyer and Bethard under center, I think. So, I'm trying to say, what was the stat here? He was tight end number 5 over the 49ers' last 3 games. So I won't use that because that's a super concentrated sample size there with Jimmy G, but I think it paints a picture, like you said, of that comfortability and of things to come.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the big thing to realize with him is that no one else on this 49ers team, none of the other pass catchers really profile as red zone targets. So George Kittle last year tied for the lead on the team in red zone targets. That was 16 targets on very limited snaps relative to, most of the people who are getting 16 plus red zone targets in the NFL. So, I mean, I see him as basically a lock for 20 plus red zone targets this year. He'll increase it on his overall 63 targets, I think. And the guy is a huge professional wrestling fan. So you really can't go wrong with him. I don't think. I think Kittle in the 10th round is another one of those where if I see him there, that's just like, oh yeah, I'm taking this, no problem.
Man, I mean, the professional wrestling thing is what puts it over the top for you. I know it's not about his football talent. It's more about, you guys share that love, correct?
Exactly. That's 100% what it is. I don't care if he gets me touchdowns, but I think he will anyway.
And that's a nice bonus. And I'll tell you what, Walsh, as a whole, I think I'm higher on the 49ers than 1 I've ever been, and 2 than I expected to as I started working through this podcast, which I don't know if that's scary or if that's just the reality. So I'm kind of unsure about how I feel about it at the moment. Yeah, I'm way more optimistic on the 49ers than ever.
I think they'll have a great year this year. Their offense should be very solid. And I'm excited to one, to watch them, and then 2, just to be around them or be around like the fans and the atmosphere, that sort of thing. Most of the time, it's not that fun to watch 49ers games in San Francisco, but I think it will be this year.
You know what, Walsh? I think times are changing. You came back to Jersey, you brought a little of that San Fran magic. That's why we're feeling good tonight. And when you go back, hopefully some good 49er football out there for you. But with that, let's move into we have 2 questions here. 2 questions, or do we have more than that? I apologize. I think it's we have 4 questions. I apologize.
Oh,
Drop
wow.
the ball there. So big night on questions so far early in the season. First one comes from Ed, and it's not that Ed for his question of the week, but this one does come from another Ed. He says, I'm in a 12-team dynasty PPR league. What do you think of trading Todd Gurley, Russell Wilson, and Jarvis Landry for Barkley, Josh Gordon, and Deshaun Watson? I won the league last year, but thinking about getting younger for the long term. Thanks.
So the first thing I would say is I don't know if you're getting that much younger. Russell Wilson's older, but Landry's actually younger than Josh Gordon. And then Gurley's going into what is his 4th year in the league?
Fourth year.
Yeah. So it's not, I mean, I guess everything matters, but it's not that much younger. I don't know, position by position, Gordon, I think long-term is better than Landry.
Yep.
So I think you're upgrading there. Gurley for Barkley, I don't think long-term that's an upgrade. Though I don't think you're giving up too much. And then Wilson for Watson, I think is a little difficult to tell as well. You're definitely getting younger, but I don't know if you're getting better. I don't know. I'm having a tough time with this. What do you think, man?
Yeah, I mean, I agree on, and I think the only clear-cut one there is the Landry Gordon, trade-off. Barkley and Gurley. I mean, because Gurley is like right now he's the hot shit, and you're gonna smell it. And Barkley's kind of he's the hot item, but we haven't seen him play, and I think he's gonna be great. That's not saying anything differently, but they got to make some moves there for him as well. I think I'd probably prefer Gurley, but again, I've always been more gun shy on rookie, that I haven't seen. And Deshaun Watson and Wilson's a wash, I think right now. Younger's good, I guess, but I think honestly, man, I think for Ed, I think it comes down to, would you rather have Gurley or would you rather have Barkley?
Yeah, that's pretty much the way it goes, I guess. And there's other factors in terms of roster construction around that sort of matter. But I think for me, I don't think it's a bad trade by any means. I'm just not sure. I'm not even sure which side really wins.
I don't think it is a win-lose here. I think it's almost just a preference. Like if this is the offer that he's received or he's sent out and someone's been receptive to, someone, if you made this offer to me, clearly I'm thinking, oh, I'd rather have Gurley, Wilson, and I can deal with the wide receiver difference between Landry and Gordon, and he must like Barkley or something. I don't think I'd personally do it. But again, I'm not a huge dynasty guy. I get it if you want to go younger and that's your goal. But I don't think I'd do it.
I don't think you need to go younger with those guys that you're looking at. Wilson's 29 years old. Gurley's in his 4th year. Jarvis Landry is 25, which is 2 years younger than Josh Gordon. In terms of getting younger, like what the future is so uncertain down the road. I think Russell Wilson is an elite quarterback for the next, 3 to 4 years at the least. What about Deshaun Watson? I have no idea.
Yeah.
Saquon Barkley, again, I think he's going to be great. I know as long as Sean McVay is there, that Todd Gurley is an elite running back for the next five years or so. Maybe not 5 years, maybe 4 or 3, that sort of thing. Yeah, you know what? I don't think I do this trade. I don't think I do it.
I almost think you're better off holding the guys you have, and I think you can maybe even get a better haul next year if you really wanted to move next year. Because I think you get the production this year. I think Gurley, Wilson both have great years, and I think their value only increases, and they're still not old. Like it's not like someone else is going to look at it and be like, oh, well, those guys are old. Like I don't want them. I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, and another thing too, I think Jarvis Landry's value, I think dips for this year is if Tyrod Taylor is throwing him the ball. I don't know that it dips if Baker Mayfield is throwing him the ball. I think Mayfield's a much better quarterback for Landry than Taylor is. Yep. So depending on how quickly you think Mayfield's going to get in the lineup, the Landry Gordon scales can tip pretty quickly as well.
Yeah, well, we took the long way around, Walsh, but we arrived at the conclusion of no.
We thought it out.
Yep. Hey, and that's what we're here for, guys. We are here to talk fantasy football, and we literally did that for maybe the first time in our history. So let's go with no. We're going to go here from Michael on Instagram. He said, do you trust David Johnson in this year's draft? And I would guess that's coming back from the injury and the team making changes and everything else. Yeah, I mean, he seems like a nice guy, 1, so I'd trust him if I hung out with him. 2, I think he'll be just fine with where he is on his ADP. And we're going to talk about him actually on the second part of the podcast coming up. But I'll say a general statement of yes, I trust him.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get into detail on why you can trust him on the next podcast. So that's what we in the business call a goddamn teaser. Boom. I'll give this away. My draft strategy, if I can choose where I pick, I'm taking the 3rd pick and I'm taking whoever's left of Bell, Gurley, and David Johnson. I pretty much just told you exactly what I'm going to do since I do have the choice of pick in our draft. But I trust David Johnson enough that that's my preferred strategy in drafting this year.
All right. Well, if Walsh trusts, we all trust. Let's talk. Take the question here from S. Hall on Instagram. I think we kind of hit it, but we're going to throw it out there anyway. He said, is Russell Wilson going to be good without any receivers besides old Doug Baldwin? Yeah, he's going to be good. He's going to be really good. Baldwin's going to be really good, and that team is going to be we talked about this with Lockett and everything else.
I mean, for half the time that he's been like an elite quarterback, his receivers were Doug Baldwin and Jermaine Kearse. So it's like I don't think he needs that much more than Doug Baldwin, honestly.
He's basically got like me and like the DON out there with Doug Baldwin, and he does it every year. So
Don's out there in the flat, and Russell Wilson's still putting up 24 fantasy points a game. So
killing it, and love you, Don. This last question comes in from it's an anonymous submission. He says, and I can understand why. He says, what are the chances that Mitch Trubisky finishes as a top 15 QB? He says, I made a bet and went with no, he won't. The loser of the bet has to dress like a woman and have a photo shoot. So,
I think he's dressing like a woman, dude. If he said no, Mitch Trubisky's going to have a really good year, I'm pretty sure. I'd say I'd say top 12. I'd even make a bet that he'd be.
Okay. Yeah, I think he finishes as a top 15 QB as well. So I think I would be a little bit concerned about how this bet is going to shake out for you.
Start picking out your dresses.
Yeah, I would say start going shopping, take a look, see what you like, and get ready for your photo shoot. And if that does happen, we'd love to send them in. We'll feature you on Instagram, or at least your league will probably be happy to send them in to us, and we will feature you on Instagram. And we'll shout back out to the podcast here because I think it's only fitting because Mitch Trubisky, big things to come. But, Walsh, that is going to do it for us here on the first part of the NFC West preview. And we are going to hit the next two teams, and we'll let you talk a little bit more about David Johnson as you've already given away your strategy. Little cliffhanger for those of you. But, guys, get ready. Tune in for part 2. Until then, I'm Nick Schreck. He's Nick Walsh. We're Let's Talk Fantasy Football, and we'll catch you on the flip side. Cool.
Sweet. I'm going to take a piss real quick.
You got it, man.
I'll be back.
No worries. I'm going to take a walk. What? Depends on the day. Love ya.
All right.
Let's ready to rock and roll, Walshy?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Like I said, if this one's quick, I really don't
Yeah, I think it'll be pretty quick.
mind because I think we did it. We went really in depth there. Honestly, I felt like we were pretty good midseason form. I thought that felt good.
Yeah, that one definitely felt good. This one I think is going to be a little less definitive because most of my takes on these two teams are like, I don't really know.
Honestly, a lot of my takes are just going to be like, yeah, well, like, fuck this guy. Like, I just don't like him. You know, like,
yeah.
And it's like, oh, well, what stats do you have on that? And it's like, I don't. I just don't like him. You know, like,
just not a fan.
You know, like, oh, like, man, like who are we looking at? Like Todd Gurley? I just don't like the guy. You know, it just looks weird.
Yeah.
So, but which is totally fine because we'll be on the same page.
Sweet.
Total nonsense. All right. I'm just gonna edit this for 1 second. Sign up now. All right. All right, ready to rock?
Yep.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Let's Talk Fantasy Football. I am your host, Nick Schreck, and joining me tonight is, once again, the fan favorite, the smartest guy we've got, and he is still here in New Jersey, guys, believe it or not. Graced us with his presence once again, the one, the only Nick Walsh. Walsh, we're here to talk NFC West. What is going on?
Not much, dude. I am ready to continue with the NFC West. It's a super interesting division, honestly. I feel like I've said that about a lot of the divisions that we've covered, but I had a really good time researching the NFC West. So I'm pumped to be back here, ready to rock and roll. What's going on with you, dude?
Not much, man. I'm still kind of reeling, I think, from the last podcast with my love for the 49ers and the expectations there, which I think is a great thing for 49er fans and, you know, fantasy just in general. And I think the division preview, as we kind of broke it out, is a tale of two halves, because I think this part of the division is not going to be as great or as sexy as maybe the first half was. But we'll see. We'll let the fans decide. You know, that's what we're here for, Walsh.
Hell yeah.
We're going to keep the fans happy. It's just people helping people, man. You know, we're living the dream. But first, Walsh, before we can live that dream, we're going to give a shout out to Auction Draft. They are the best site for running your fantasy football auction league in 2018. You can sign up now by going to letstalkfantasyfootball.com/auction draft. Use the promo code LTFF, and James and the staff over there is going to give you guys 50% off your league for 2018, guys. You can play in short 5-week seasons, or you can play season long. It is literally the ultimate experience for auction drafting, and you guys are going to love it when we do our draft on there for you to hear and break down. And we're excited for what is to come, because it's July, mid-July really, and we're not that far, Walsh, from really kicking things off in the football world.
No, not at all. We got camps coming up. We got important things coming. I mean, hell, my first draft, I want to say on the calendar is about a month from today, maybe, or is that not a Friday? No, it is a Friday. All right, yeah, my first draft is like a month and 1 day from today. So I really gotta like pick my stuff up here. I gotta be serious, you know?
Yeah, man, we're getting into the thick of it. You know, people are here. They're trying to get their things straight, because if we're that close to draft day, that means they're that close to draft day.
Exactly.
You know, and Walsh, for us we need to pick it up, because we're also in the running for a podcast award, courtesy of podcastawards.com. And we are hoping you guys are willing to go out there and nominate us. And whether you love us or hate us, again, perfect punishment would be for us to have to accept that award. And we'll make sure the DON goes and accepts that award. You guys are going to podcastawards.com. You're going to register for free right there on the page. Click on nominations, and you can look for Let's Talk Fantasy Football. We're in the sports category, and we're in, I think, the best in show is the category. So love us, hate us, vote for us. That's our campaign. Let's Talk Fantasy Football 2018. But Walsh, here we go. Let's start with the Rams, and we'll start at the QB position. Jared Goff, QB number 15, going off with the first pick in the 11th round. And before we even dive into any analysis on him, I want to throw Ed's question of the week out there. It's actually a hell of a way to kick off the podcast, and I think the timing's perfect. He says, if you leave your draft with Jared Goff as your only QB, are you cool with that? And I think let's talk that and analysis now on Jared Goff.
So if I'm leaving the draft with Goff only, I think it really depends on my league itself. So if I have a league where I know that I can pick up a different quarterback to stream every week, fine. The Rams play the Raiders week 1. I'll start Jared Goff week 1. That's a good streaming matchup. But if you're in the sort of league where maybe people draft 2 quarterbacks, it's a 12-team league, everyone kind of loads up on them. I want someone else to play based on matchups with Jared Goff. So I'm not comfortable leaving the draft and saying I'm going to start Jared Goff every single week of this season. I think that's an extremely bad move. Last year he was quarterback 14 at the end of the year, And I think he works kind of fine in the spot that he's being drafted. But that defense is good, and they're going to try and give Gurley the ball as much as they can. So that in itself just sort of limits his ceiling and what he can really do. Again, if you think they're going to be in a close-ish, high-scoring matchup, like I think they'll be week 1 against the Raiders, play him. Absolutely. He should be in every starting lineup week 1. It's a great matchup. But weeks after that, where maybe they're a big favorite or you think they'll get up big early, that's not the right time to be playing Jared Goff.
I completely agree. I think that's a slam dunk analysis. I think it's super, super hitting the nail on the head, Walsh. And I think if people want to see a slam dunk in real life, they should check out Nick Walsh's Instagram. Look at his most recent upload, and that video is going to be exactly what you just heard in word form. You're just going to see it in video. So I think, he's killing it on the basketball court, and he's killing it here in his fantasy analysis. But Walsh, I honestly think you're spot on here with Jared Goff. Ed, no, I'm not. I'm not cool with him at all, leaving as my QB1. Again, if you play the streaming game as Walsh dove into, different scenario for me. I tend not to play it because I just tend not to be good at streaming quarterbacks, unfortunately. I end up drafting 2 average guys and then never playing the right one. That's more my MO. So, but otherwise, absolutely not for Jared Goff. I think his QB 15, he's fine there because that's kind of where he finished last year. And he could see an uptick here, I think. But like you said, that team is just going to feed Todd Gurley, who is running back number 1 coming off the board. He's arguably the number 1 pick, depending on who you talk to. And Walsh, the division, super interesting because we'll get to David Johnson. But, you look at all these top guys. Here's 2 top guys in the same division that you could argue could go at number 1 if it was your preference. In fantasy drafts. So a lot of talent. I don't really think we need to share a ton on Todd Gurley. I think he's going where he's going. I don't think there's any debate about him being we'll call him a top 3 pick. And I think that's what you alluded to before. Yeah,
absolutely. I think anyone you can make an argument for Zeke as number 4, whatever you think about him, but Todd Gurley, Le'Veon Bell, and David Johnson to me are clearly the top 3 picks. I personally like Gurley number 1 out of them, but it's extremely close. I don't have a huge preference, which is why I said in the last podcast, I think my strategy is try to get that 3rd pick. But yeah, it's easy. They were such a good offense last year. He got so much work. He got over 100 targets. They return all 5 offensive line starters this year. Todd Gurley's a great pick where he's going. Not much more than that.
Perfect. And I'm not interested in any of the backs behind him at all. Are you?
I'm kind of interested to see who kind of emerges, if anyone. I know Malcolm Brown's kind of the favorite to emerge there. John Kelly is a rookie that they brought in. So, anytime you've got someone like Todd Gurley who's going to be getting so much work, that defense is really, really good. You would think if he gets hurt, that whoever's behind him is going to get work unless it's a clear committee. So if you see someone emerge behind him as Malcolm Brown will be getting 15 to 18 touches a game on the Rams now that Todd Gurley isn't playing for a couple weeks, that's good to me. So, I don't really like handcuffing too much. I'm not going to tell you who I would knock out or who I would not be drafting towards the end of the draft, but I don't think whoever emerges as the Rams backup running back is a bad pick at the end of the draft.
Fair enough. And that is why Walsh is the best fantasy analyst we got, because I would have just moved on. But no, it's good. That's great feedback. But let's get into the wide receivers, Walsh. And I think in general, I just have a note here I want to add about Brandon Cooks, Cooper Kupp, and Robert Woods. Between the 3, the Rams now have 3 wide receivers who have averaged 6+ targets per game last year in their respective offenses. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how this wide receiver core breaks down. Brandon Cooks signs a 5-year deal worth $80 million with the Rams. Coming off the board, wide receiver 23, 4th pick in the 5th round. I actually don't know. I'm trying to see if he's moved at all lately.
Brandon Cooks?
Yeah, I was just looking to see on the draft. He's about set there. He's between 6 and 4.
Okay.
So he's mid-5th round. It's pretty much where he's been for a while.
Yeah, sorry, I unplugged my microphone or my headphones on accident for a minute. Did you mention that he got a 5-year contract extension today?
I mean, look, Walsh, I know you don't like what I have to say a lot, but, just tuning me out during the podcast is a little bit of a personal attack. So we'll talk off air about it. It's not a big deal. I'll be a little upset tonight. But, yeah, Brandon Cooks gets that 5-year deal with $80 million. Good for him.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, man. I slammed my hand down for some reason and just really knocked my my headphone jack out. But anyway, do you have an opinion about him, like, at this spot? Because, like, I don't know what to think at all about Brandon Cooks here.
Yeah, I'm torn because, as I looked at that contract today, I think that was the only thing that could flash through my head as I looked at it now, analyzing him. And I was like, man, they just paid him a lot of money.
They have to want him, right? They have to want him to, like, get a lot of work.
They paid him a ton of money, but it goes back to the argument we talked about before where, they get up big, they're going to run the ball, they're going to feed Todd Gurley. It's kind of why we're like, well, Jared Goff, like, he's fine, but, he's not going to be out there throwing, 553 passes or whatever, So I don't know. I'm kind of looking at the ADPs and who's around him right now, to be honest. And, I mean, you look at wide receivers, you got Golden Tate, Alshon Jeffrey, Jarvis Landry, Chris Hogan, Marvin Jones. I think.
Yeah, I guess that's fair then, right?
I think that's right. I mean, I think you could, it depends how you feel on Tate and Alshon. Like, you can go up to Allen Robinson at 4.9. Like, it really, I think, comes down to preference. I think he's priced right. I don't know how I feel about it, but I think he's priced where he should be based on talent, past performance, what this team is going to do. They're going to win. And based on, even without him there, that stat saying that, the wide receivers average 6+ targets a game. I mean, if he catches 4 of those 6 a game, that's 4 PPR points plus his yardage. He's going to find the end zone. I think he's priced right. I don't know what I'll do with him in drafts until I probably am, like, on the clock, to be at least at this point. I mean, I may feel differently as we get into August a little bit more, but right now I honestly think Brandon Cooks is a guy that I would just decide on in the moment, and that's a gut call, and that's not always something you can quantify here.
Yeah, I think all 3 of these wide receivers are kind of like guys where if I saw them as, like, the next wide receiver on my list of rankings when my pick comes up, I'm kind of, like, panicking and looking to see what other positions, like what tight end is available or, like, what running back is available, because I'm not really in love with any of them. But, like, I guess, like, not that they're a panic pick, but they're kind of a panic pick. My issue with Cooks is that he's had at least 114 targets in the past 3 years. And all 3 of those years were with either Drew Brees or Tom Brady. And he's replacing Sammy Watkins, who had 70 targets last year. And a lot of those were when Robert Woods was injured and not playing. So how do we reconcile those two things? Do we say, oh, no, Cooper Kupp's going to get less targets, Robert Woods is going to get less targets, Todd Gurley is going to get less work? Like, I don't think you can confidently say any of those things. So how do we reconcile the fact? And I mean, Brandon Cooks is being drafted way later than he has in the past. He's been a 2nd to 3rd round type guy, but is he going to be a guy you can play every week when he's, number 1, their deep threat, so less consistent week to week, and 2 is maybe going to see 90, 95 targets instead of his 114 or more? It becomes, and he's a guy that we've had trouble playing week to week in the past because he's, a big play guy. So it's a little bit difficult for me to really say that I want to draft him. But I guess if the right situation came up, like when I look at those guys around him, you're right. I don't think he's mispriced. I just don't particularly want him.
Yeah, it's like you said, though. You start dancing around your board where you're like, man, like I already have like 3 running backs because I did that. I got my number 1 wide receiver, but like, is this really what I want to do here? Or do I like want to go for like, if you believe in it, like a Jimmy Graham at tight end, who's literally one
right
after like
exactly what I was going to say. And I think I'm taking Jimmy Graham. And when I'm making that decision, I'm taking Jimmy Graham like every time, unless I already drafted a tight end.
Like you start dancing your board, or you're looking at like, oh man, like, QB, like for us, it's different because QBs fall, but you could start dancing and being like, oh shit, like, like Deshaun Watson's 11-4. Like, are you like, do I really want Russell Wilson? And you overpay for Russell Wilson or some, like, you start looking elsewhere because you can't decide on Brandon Cooks.
Right.
So yeah, I probably won't own any shares of Brandon Cooks, as everyone on the listening probably can already tell, just because I probably will panic elsewhere based on the unknown. And that's a commodity. If you believe that he's going to have a great year, that's a fucking win for you. You know, or he's going to slide down boards and someone else is going to get a good deal on him. Just isn't going to be me. Out of the other two wide receivers, Walsh, I prefer Robert Woods over Cooper Kupp.
See, I prefer Cooper Kupp.
Interesting.
So, but I don't think you're wrong necessarily. It's just like I'm kind of perplexed by this whole situation. I mean, Woods would have led the team in targets if it weren't for that late season injury that he had. I don't really know how he's going to be used this year. Kupp, I feel like, is kind of on the upswing of his career as a guy coming into his second year, and he's going to see the majority of the slot work, which is always good for number of targets. He also had a lot more red zone targets, which his number of red zone targets, it kind of indicates a little bit higher of a touchdown total that he ended up with. I know he had a couple bad drops in the end zone, but I'm kind of looking at Cooper Kupp as a candidate for touchdown regression, which is why I'm, preferring him. I don't know if we said this, but Cooper Kupp is currently wide receiver 37 and Robert Woods is wide receiver 38. So you're splitting hairs here. They're both mid-8th round. But yeah, I like Cooper Kupp a little bit more. But why did you choose Woods over him?
I think part of it is liking Woods and part of it is the regression / scare on Kupp a little bit. You know, he dropped 7 of 69 catchable balls, which is out of 7. I mean, it's almost 10%. Of good balls there. And I think Robert Woods, like you said, when you extrapolate his being on pace, he was on pace for 75, about 1,050 and 7 touchdowns on 113 targets. So again, I mean, we're projecting and saying, oh, if he stayed healthy, this is what, he was on pace for. I think I'm basing a lot more on last year's numbers and where I see that going, and some regression on Cooper Kupp. But again, I have no argument. If that's who you really want, they're literally the same pick. It's just where you want to throw your dart between the two.
Yeah, and I'm trying to look to see who else is going around there too. Like, geez, I mean, Randall Cobb is going right in front. I think I'd rather have him than either of them. You've got Devontae Parker, you've got Jordy Nelson, Robbie Anderson, Marquise Goodwin. I don't know. I'm not going to be owning many Rams wide receivers, I don't think, this year.
Nope, I completely agree. And this is, look, this is, like I said in the intro, this is a part where it's not as, the division's almost not as sexy on this half, and we're only through one of the two teams on the second side. It's just not. I mean, I don't think they'd look as good in dresses, for that guy that's going to lose and take his pictures in dresses there.
That's true.
He bet wrong on Mitch Trubisky, we think. But, yeah, I agree. I mean, you look at the draft board, and it's just like, Jordy, Cobb. I'll go elsewhere. I probably will not own any Rams. I won't have a shot probably at Todd Gurley in most leagues, so I probably won't own a ton of Rams, which I think is fair to now turn into the tight end conversation where you got Tyler Higbee and Gerald Everett. I think if you like one more, it's Gerald Everett for me. But again, I don't think I'm going to own either of them. But I prefer Everett over Higbee.
Everett's not a guy that I'm looking to draft, and Higbee, I think you would be an idiot to draft. But Everett, I think, is at least intriguing. He was the 44th pick last year. Was used much more in the passing game than Higbee, despite getting fewer snaps than Higbee. So it's clear they see Higbee as the blocking tight end, Everett as the guy that they would like to have going forward as their receiving tight end. He's talented. I think they could increase his usage this year. But again, where are they taking that usage from? We just talked about how we're not sure how the targets are going to be split among the wide receivers. We know Gurley's not losing usage. So Everett's an intriguing name. Don't draft him.
Fair enough, Walsh. I think you hit the nail on the head. Don't spin the wheel there, guys. Just keep an eye on it. And time comes, maybe you can spin the wheel. Bi-week fill-in, or if you're playing the wire, as most of us tight end owners do. But with that, Walsh, we're going to take a quick break. You guys are going to hear from Auction Draft, and we will be right back. All right, guys, that was Auction Draft. Remember, you can sign up now at auctiondraft.net. Use the promo code LTFF for 50% off your 2018 season. That's right, 50% off. James and the team over there, awesome guys, awesome group, and they're going to take care of you. They want you to have the best auction draft you've ever had, and we have no doubt that they're going to make it happen. But we need to get back to fantasy football, Walsh, and we're going to start with none other than the Cardinals QB situation, I'll call it. Sam Bradford coming off the board as undrafted, and Josh Rosen coming off the board as, drumroll, undrafted. So, again, I don't think there's any fantasy. I don't care about either of them at all. Patrick Peterson is quoted as saying that although Sam Bradford is the Cardinals' starting quarterback, Rosen blew his mind during the first week of practice. So Patrick Peterson with great things to say about Josh Rosen.
Yeah, I love Josh Rosen. He was my favorite quarterback coming out of this draft. I think he's extremely good at football, though he might be he's going to make a lot of mistakes. He's going to throw a lot of picks. He tries to force some balls, that sort of thing. But for the purpose of fantasy football this year, both of them are streamers that are not worth drafting. Just keep an eye on matchups, that sort of thing. It's also worth noting before we get too far into the Cardinals that Bruce Arians is gone, which is unfortunate. Bruce Arians was kind of one of my favorite coaches because he just kind of threw the ball down the field a lot. Really, really fun. Didn't really care too much and was willing to take risks. So with him gone, they're going to have a whole new look for the offense. Steve Wilkes is the new head coach. He's more of a defensive guy. Mike McCoy, who you will know from as the former OC for the Broncos and former head coach for the Chargers, he's going to be their offensive coordinator. Steve Wilkes says they want to run the ball a lot. That makes sense. He's a defensive guy. He's old school and wants to defend and run. So keep that in mind, I guess. I think another thing to keep in mind in general when looking at these quarterbacks and the whole team, the offensive line is probably going to suck. They're not good. They weren't good last year. They didn't really make improvements. So yeah, I mean, just keep that in mind when if you see a team, like if you're considering streaming Sam Bradford in week 4 or something, and the team that they're playing against has a good pass rush, maybe don't stream Sam Bradford.
There you go, guys. You heard it here first. Look at the matchups. Walsh has got you covered, and he'll have you covered weekly when it comes to streaming because he is our resident streamer, and he always seems to make it work. So shout out there to you, Walsh. But let's talk about,
man.
You got it, man. You kill it. You kill it. So we appreciate the work you do, and so does everybody else because it helps them win. And we're dumb enough. The guys that do the podcast with you are dumb enough to be like, yeah, I just don't agree. And then every week it fucking works out, and we're like, well, Walsh was right again. So one day we will wise up. But for now, we still are the dumb buffoons mocking your streaming calls. But let's
Good word, buffoon.
Yeah, so yeah, throw the vocab in there every once in a while. Try and class this joint up a little bit. But David Johnson, Walsh, we talked about how you think he's a top 3 guy. You want the 3rd pick in the draft because it leaves you Bell, Gurley, or David Johnson. He's recovered from his wrist injury. He's back healthy. They want to run the hell out of the ball. I don't really think you need to give a ton more here on David Johnson.
No, I'm right there with you. I think the cons that people will bring up are the ones that I just brought up. The offensive line is bad, and they changed the coach. So he excelled with Bruce Arians. Is it still going to work out? Those are valid concerns. I definitely understand why you would think those. But just in case you guys forgot, let me remind you just how good and just how prolific David Johnson was in 2016 when he was healthy. Because having him miss the entire season last year, I think it's easy to forget. In 2016, David Johnson had 2,118 yards from scrimmage and 20 touchdowns. He accomplished those numbers while receiving 120 targets out of the backfield. And yeah, those are insane numbers. If you're not reacting to those, just like, how did he do those things? I don't know what planet you're from, because in the modern NFL, those are not numbers that a running back gets pretty often. So David Johnson's an elite talent. Yes, the system's different. Yes, the offensive line is bad. That doesn't change the fact that he's an incredible running back.
Completely agreed. I have nothing further to add, Your Honor. But the backs behind him, Walsh, Elijah Penny, Chase Edmonds, both coming out undrafted. Do you care? Do you think either of them are talented enough to take this role and run with it? God forbid there's another David Johnson injury here.
No, I think it'll be a committee type of thing. If David Johnson were to get hurt, there's a couple like scat pass catching backs back there. I think TJ Logan is one of them. I forget the other guy's name. Chase Edmonds is kind of notable because he's a rookie, 4th rounder out of Fordham actually. So good guy. Went to college in the Bronx. We like that. He's likely to be their primary backup, but he won't be a 3 down type guy. Like I said, they have a couple of pass catchers, and then Elijah Penny is a 235-pound short yardage specialist. So if David Johnson goes down, Chase Edmonds is the primary back, and he's not going to get the goal line work or the passing down back. So don't think about any of them.
Fair enough. With a bad O-line, and they're not David Johnson. So kind of icing on the cake.
Pretty much.
All right, well, let's talk wide receivers, and we'll kick it off with none other than Larry Fitzgerald, Old Faithful, we'll say. Coming off the board at wide receiver 15, 9th pick here in the 3rd round. I'm actually just pulling up Fantasy Football Calculator because I don't think I realized how far up draft boards he's actually is. I expect
he's going ahead of Stephon Diggs.
Yeah. So here's what I'll say on Larry Fitzgerald as I look at the receivers, the situation around him, I'll call it. I love Larry Fitzgerald. He's finished inside the top 12 in PPR scoring for 3 years in a row and 7 times since 2008 while only missing 2 games during that stretch. I think he's overpriced. I love Larry Fitzgerald. I think he's going to perform, but I think he's almost at his ceiling. You know, you're buying him pretty high. I expected him to be a couple rounds lower. I think people tend to get down on Fitz because he's old and whatever, but I still expected to be able to pay way less for Fitz. I wouldn't pay for him at 3.9.
Interesting. See, I'm all about him right there, but I will also qualify that by saying that I am constantly wrong on him. Whether it's game to game, season to season, I have never had the correct Larry Fitzgerald take in like my history of playing fantasy football. That being said, I really like him this year. I would honestly take him over like Tyreek Hill. I might take him over Adam Thielen and T.Y. Hilton, Josh Gordon. The guy, like, he might be my wide receiver 11.
Wow.
But the reason I say that is because who the hell else are they throwing to on this offense? You know, Fitzgerald is going to eat targets. We know if Sam Bradford's the quarterback, that Sam Bradford has historically loved slot receivers. His most productive receiver in St. Louis was Danny Amendola out of the slot. His most productive receiver in Philly was Jordan Matthews out of the slot. His most productive receiver in Minnesota was Stephon Diggs, who played the majority of his snaps out of the slot. So, I mean, to me, slot receiver is where it's at in terms of Sam Bradford being the quarterback. Larry Fitzgerald has been incredible, doesn't really show any signs of slowing down, even though he's 35 years old. I'm all over Larry Fitzgerald, but I am always wrong about Larry Fitzgerald. So take that for what you will.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, look, I love Larry Fitzgerald. I think I played him against you, and he worked out for me multiple times last year.
You and I have had multiple DFS matchups hinge on Larry Fitzgerald, whether it's him putting up a lot of points for you or putting up like 4 points for me. I have lost so many DFS matchups to you based on Larry Fitzgerald.
Oh, Larry Fitz, you have been good to me in more ways than one. But I think Christian Kirk is an interesting guy here for, again, it's essentially a free pick. I think he contributes more for the offense or the team as a whole, probably on returning punts and kickoffs and special teams. But I also think he's someone that may be able to slide into that slot position and step in and help contribute there. So, I don't know. I mean, they've got J.J. Nelson, they've got Bryce Butler, Chad Williams. Like, I don't know who necessarily steps in. He is a rookie, Christian Kirk. So, but I think at his price, he could be interesting to watch and see if he steps into that slot role there. With Bradford throwing the ball his way a little bit. So not really a reason I'm necessarily down on Fitz, but I think he could be interesting, Christian Kirk.
That's fair. And I think there is, if you think that Kirk can step into that role and maybe put Fitz outside a little bit, that definitely makes a ton of sense. In my head, my line of thinking was Fitz is in the slot. That's not changing. Christian Kirk profiles as a slot receiver, and they're going to have to kick him outside where he's not used to playing. So in my head, that, I mean, again, it really just depends on how you see it. Neither one of those takes is right. It's just sort of different hypotheticals happening. Totally. If my hypothetical happens, we saw what happened when the Eagles tried to put Nelson Aguilar, who's a slot receiver, on the outside. He was the worst receiver in football for 2 years straight. Yes. So I don't really see any reason to draft Christian Kirk, working under the assumption that he's not going to be able to run out of the slot this year.
Totally fair. Do you care about Chad Williams, Bryce Butler, or JJ Nelson?
I love Bryce Butler. That should be apparent to anyone who's ever listened to the podcast before. With all three of these guys, I'm watching the preseason closely to see who's getting the snaps, because there's a lot of targets available there. John Brown and Jaron Brown combined for 114 targets last year in this offense. They do want to run the ball more, so who knows if that really happens or if it's actually that many targets. But like, even if it's 90 targets, like, they got to go somewhere. If one of these guys can really step into this role that I don't think Christian Kirk is going to be able to fill, then they might have some sort of fantasy value. And I really hope it's Bryce Butler, because that guy is incredible and is constantly getting shafted on playing time.
Oh, Bryce Butler. You always get the raw end of the stick, unfortunately. So we'll see if Christian Kirk steals it from you again, or if this is your year, and shall I say Walsh's year. Because he's a very happy man watching Fitz on the slot and Bryce Butler coming in and getting the snaps and playing time he deserves. Walsh, tight end, Ricky Seals-Jones, tight end 16, 11th pick in the 13th round. One, I want no part of him. Spin the wheel elsewhere. Two, sleeper bot, breaking news. Ricky Seals-Jones was arrested and charged with assault, disorderly conduct.
When did this happen?
It just broke. Disorderly conduct and criminal trespassing in Scottsdale, Arizona this past Saturday.
Wow.
That I think that sums it up on Ricky Seals-Jones.
Yeah, I was going to say keep an eye on his preseason and see how many snaps he's getting, because he had a couple multi-touchdown games last year, even though he only got 28 targets. But yeah, never mind.
His preseason is going to look a little bit different than we thought coming into the podcast.
Yeah.
Thanks to the breaking news update there on Ricky Seals-Jones. So, again, we'll see. We know the No Fun League likes to crack down on things, whether they're convicted, but some serious charges. So we'll see what happens. Spin that wheel, folks, just elsewhere, not here in Arizona right now with Ricky Seals-Jones. Walsh, do you have anything else here for the fine, good fans?
No, man, I'm all set.
All right, guys. Well, that's going to do it here for us on the NFC West preview. Wraps up part 1 and part 2. If you haven't listened to part 1, pause this one, go back, or just end this one. It's pretty much over. Go back, listen to part 1, and make sure you get all the info you guys need. We dove super deep there. Again, a sexier first half of the division than the second half. But they both need their love and attention here from the LTFF crew. But we were coming to you live from Jersey, guys. This is a rare thing here coming from Walsh. So it has been my pleasure, Walsh, to be here with you in Jersey. But we are Let's Talk Fantasy Football, and we will catch you on the flip side.